Well, joining us now from Hong Kong is Amnesty International's China researcher, William Ni. Mr. Ni, good to see you there. You're here to talk generally about the issue of protest and government tolerance, because in the past, street protests were allowed to a degree to allow people to blow off steam, but that seems to be changing a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think that the government has always tried to limit these types of protests. One of the difficult things in talking about this is that the outside world doesn't even know the extent of the problem. The government used to compile statistics on what they called mass incidents, which could be anything from a few people protesting to gigantic protests and often violent protests like the one you just profiled in Lin Shui. But the government stopped making those figures public a while ago. So it's difficult for outsiders to grasp how this is going. But I think that what's very worrying is that in the last, of course, 30 years, there's been tremendous economic growth, and people have been able to get greater personal freedom. And in the last 10 to 15 years, different NGOs and civil society organizations have popped up to help people express their grievances so they don't have to resort to this type of protest. But in the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a crackdown on human rights defenders, and many of these NGOs will come under strain. China has a draft overseas NGO management law that is up for consultation now. And this is very worrying. It's not getting much press internationally, but what it would do is make it almost impossible for foreign NGOs to set up. And even if they did, they would be subjected to supervision from the Public Security Bureau. And it would cut off domestic NGOs and charities from international funding and support.
So what can be done about that? What is the comeback for NGOs and those who want to see their powers remain?
Well, this law is up for public comment until June 4th. So anybody can submit something. Amnesty International, of course, will be submitting things, but it's very important for people who maybe have projects with local NGOs to also submit their concerns. But this is part of a broader trend. They've cracked down on NGOs like the Transition Institute, which is a think tank. They've accused some of the leaders of illegal publishing simply for publishing books and research reports. Of course, we've had Iremping, one of the famous anti-discrimination organizations, has had their offices raided, and 5 feminists were detained earlier in March for 37 days simply for wanting to have protests against sexual harassment on public transport. And they're still under investigation for a year. They've in fact interrogated one of the women and threatened to put her in a male prison and have her raped. So this is the thinking that's behind the the NGO law. But what's ironic is that if you restrict the space for civil society, then it'll be harder for people to express their grievances. And we may see more of the unfortunate protests that we saw just now in Lin Shui.
All right, William Ni, it's very good to get your perspective on this. We appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.